This is an interview of Robert Strong. The date is March 14th, 1987. And we're in Bob's office here in the Strong & Strong building in Earlville, Illinois. Melvin Mitchell is the cameraman. My name's Kenneth Stockley. And we're interviewing Bob as a series of interviews of some of the residents of Earlville to get down on tape the memories and recollections they might have of people in the past and days gone by around Earlville. Well, Bob, it's good to talk to you this morning. Haven't seen you for a while.
Oh, it's been a long time.
You're looking pretty good. Look kind of familiar here back behind your desk here. Bob, do you mind telling us, were you born in Earlville or around Earlville or near Earlville? Or,
I was born in Earlville, about 2 blocks south of here.
You were born in the home, or?
I was born in the house my dad built. He always said he had it paid for before he married my mother, and he tore down the Universalist Church and built the house.
Now that's the house that Bob Harris lives in.
That's the house Bob Harris lives in now.
Now, what was about the date or about the year you were born?
I was born in 1920, February 7th.
Yeah. And your dad and mother had been living in that house for a while, I imagine. That was their family home at the time.
That's where they lived all their lives, right.
Now, are you saying that the old Universalist Church was at that location before your dad built the house?
No, the Universalist Church was on a vacant lot, right on that corner, where there now is a vacant lot, right across from Doc Fisher's office to the north. Mm-hmm. And then there was a vacant lot north of that, and that's where he built the house. So the Universalist Church really was on the corner, right on the corner, where there's a vacant lot now, or a lot now, where everybody.
And he got 2 lots then.
You know, he got 3 lots.
3 lots. Yeah. Now the Universalist Church, was it there when your father bought the property, and then he tore it down, or had it tore down?
Yeah. He tore the church down, and he used the brick from that church as a backup brick for that house he built.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so there's brick in there from the Universalist Church. And years ago, up in the attic of that house, were some of the things he took out of the church. And in our home, we have the pulpit chairs, 3 pulpit chairs.
That came from that church?
That came from that church. They've been refurbished by, what's his name down at Harding? Died now.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either.
Well, anyway, Rosemary.
I've seen the church. I've seen the chairs.
That was in my father's will. If we get those, Rosemary and I get those three chairs from that Universalist Church.
Those they're beautiful chairs, and they look like they're new. So they're really antiques. They'd be almost irreplaceable. I mean, they wouldn't have you couldn't value something like that. They're so rare.
I don't know of anything else that's around that came out of that church. But we have some photos of it.
I wonder why it disbanded or why it broke up.
Because he said there was they wanted to sell it because there was only 14 members left, 12 or 14 members left, and it just was inactive, and there were too many churches, and
just the congregation
and
probably
they had
down
it for sale, so he bought it.
Congregation probably drifted away, or maybe got older, and as churches sometimes do,
that's right,
just dwindled down so that there wasn't any interest anymore.
That's right.
Well, I want to get on and talk about your father and your grandfather, but before we do that, let's just touch base a little bit on your early life, and so we know where you came from and who, what you did. You went to the school.
I went to
Earlville
grade in high school.
I remember you played basketball. I
lived here all my life, and
you were on a good team or two there in basketball.
I graduated in 1938 from high school, and I went to North Central College for 1 year. And my grandfather came and got me, and told me to come back, and my father, he needed me here in this business. And
that was that was an elevator business.
Right in this business.
It was a grain business.
Yeah.
But now the Army, or the Armed Services came in there sometime.
So I came here into business in '39, and then I went into service in early '43.
What was that?
In the Navy.
Navy?
Yeah, and yes. And I went in the Navy in '43 and stayed there until 1946. I went to Great Lakes for 8 weeks, and then they sent me to Port Hueneme, and you can't spell that, California.
I'll take your word for it.
North of Los Angeles, right near Santa Barbara, south of Santa Barbara, and I stayed there for almost 3 years. Worked in the office there.
So you come back to Earlville around 45?
Late 40, in early 46.
46. Now, were you married at the time? Or,
Yes, and I had 2 daughters, Sandra and Mary. Sandra was born while I was out in California.
Oh.
You know, August the 5th, 45, and then when I came, 44, whatever, 45, I guess. No, 44. Anyway, while I was in California, Mary Beth was born while I was here.
She was born here.
Yeah, 3 years later after Mary Beth, after Sandra. And
then you went back into the business.
As soon as I came back, I came into the business, and I was in the business before I went to the Navy, of course, from 1939 on. Then my grandfather died while I was out in the Navy and out in California.
Oh, is that right? No, let's talk about your grandfather and your father a little before we get away from it.
My grandfather came here in 1906.
Now, what was his name?
Charles Crawford Strong.
Charles C.C. Strong.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen that name.
Yeah.
C.C. Strong. Where did he come from?
He came here from Grand Ridge. He had a bank in Grand Ridge, or was instrumental in the bank in Grand Ridge, and evidently there was an opportunity for the Earlville National Bank on the corner, kitty corner from his office, where he came here and I don't know if the bank was operating at that time or if he opened it or what, but anyway, they started a bank there. He and some of his friends. And
right on the corner?
Right on the corner, yeah.
Kitty cornered across from this office right now. And then, how did the grain business come about? Was this later then?
No, and then my father came here, and after he went to school, and he finished up high school
at
Streeter.
In Streeter.
And he lived with a couple down there, so he could finish high school.
And your father's name, just for the record, is
Robert A. Strong.
Robert A. What does the A stand for?
That's his mother's maiden name was Aldrich.
Aldrich. Oh yeah. Frequently, people are named after other people. Right. Like your middle name is
Walker.
Walker, after
my mother.
Your mother's maiden name.
Right.
Okay. Well, getting back to your dad then and your granddad, how did the grain business get established?
Well, I assume that my grandfather and Alvin Kaminke were very good friends. Well, I know they were very good friends, and I assume when he came to Earlville, he became acquainted with Alvin Kaminke and others, and they were the ones that were in the bank over here. And for when I can remember him talking about it. And then Alvin Kaminke retired, moved to town about that time evidently, and he and my father started the grain business together.
Now, what location, or where did they start?
Oh, they bought an elevator out on the northwestern track for right near where my mill now stands.
Well,
as a matter of fact, right where it stands.
Out the west side of town there?
Out the west side of town. Now, that's where they started.
Near the co-op. It's kind of south of the co-op.
Yeah,
elevator.
That's right.
Okay, that's where they started the grain business.
Right, 1907.
1907.
It was called Kaminke and Strong at that time.
That's 80 years ago.
That's right.
Well then, did they build a new elevator here then, at this location?
There was a fellow named L.I. Taylor in the grain business here, and he wanted to go to Raton, New Mexico.
Taylor?
So, L.I. Taylor.
L.I. Taylor.
Another thing, the Taylor house is the one that's right north of the Swenson house over here.
Where Mr. Taylor lived? Or?
No. Yeah, that's where L.I. Taylor, no relation to Prof. Taylor now.
Oh, yeah.
You'll have to edit this.
No, that's all right.
But this L.I. Taylor the Taylor house is the one that's right north of, across the street from the Methodist Church, be the second house north of Nemur Cleo's.
Okay.
That
Okay.
big white house
Oh,
that's
yes.
vacant now.
Yes.
That was the L.I. Taylor house.
And he was the man who
He
owned
had this place, he had this grain business, he wanted to sell, so my grandfather, anyway, so they bought this. I suppose Kminky and Strong bought this, and then they had two elevators.
Mhm.
Then they bought the one in Rollo.
Now, was there an elevator in Rollo too?
There
that
was
they
an
bought?
elevator in Rollo at that time, and who they bought that from, I don't know.
Mhm.
It was one that you had to, was really an old one, you know, one that, and that burned.
So they constructed another one there, I suppose.
Yes, they built that one, the one that's there now. They built that.
Mhm.
And I don't know at what time, I don't think Kminky was in the business with him too long, because I think that they got started together, and then I think Kminky felt he was getting older, and he got involved in other things probably, and so he sold out to my father and my grandfather, and that's where the name Strong and Strong came.
So the
But
Strong
I
and
can't
Strong
tell you
was,
just what time it was, but I don't think it was too long.
it'd be probably before World War I, I would
I'm
think.
sure it was.
Yeah, yeah. Now, where did your grandfather live when he was
He
in
lived
Earlville?
on Brown Street, the second house east of where the Whitman house is, if people know where the Whitman house is.
Oh, yes. On Brown Street, north of the tracks. here.
Yeah, that's where as I recall, that's, they probably lived there, moved there when they came from Grand Ridge.
Mhm. And your father, when he came from Grand Ridge, then I suppose he lived with them too.
Lived up there with them, right?
And then eventually your father, well, your grandfather got out of the business, I suppose, or phased out
I don't
after a
think my
number of years.
grandfather was ever active in the grain business, really.
This was mostly,
But it was just more of the name and partnership like father and son. And
then your father got married, I suppose, in the early
yeah,
days,
they got
probably
married,
around
I think
the World
in
War I days.
1914 they got married.
Yeah.
As I recall, in the house, they got married in the house south of where Bill Norton lives now, which was the Walker house. And at that time, my grandmother and grandfather Walker, when they moved off the Walker farm, they moved to Earlville, and that where Bill Norton's house, what I call Bill Norton's house, is now
Around the corner
was a vacant lot, and my grandfather evidently bought all those lots there in that house. And he built that house about the same time my father built the house that we spoke about before.
Now
But they were built at the same time.
now are you saying the house that Bill Norton lives in
Yeah,
was built by
my
your
grandfather
grandfather
Walker.
Walker? Oh, is that right?
And
I didn't know
also
that.
the house west of it where there's a small house right west of where Mrs. Hatton lives. He built that too. My grandfather. See, so there's 3 lots. I used to mow the grass there, so I know there's 3 lots there.
We did mention your mother. She was Pearlie Walker. Right.
No middle name.
No middle name. And the Walker farm is the farm out here east of town on Route 34 where Fritz Nelson lives now.
Correct.
And that was her home, early home.
That's where she lived, and I think before my father and mother were married, that my grandfather moved to town, and prior to that he'd already retired and came to town. Another thing that might be interesting to Melvin especially would be the fact that when he came to town, or even maybe before, he and John Harris were operated the shipping association down here at the stockyards.
Oh, yes.
And he and John Harris, my grandfather Walker and John Harris were really, and my grandfather Strong were really good friends, really very close friends. Because I remember when I was a young boy sitting in here and hearing them talk farming and politics and all the other.
And that's when they'd ship
the same as we do now.
Ship livestock.
Yeah, and they'd bring livestock in at that time by drive them in, you know, right up Ottaway Street, and hell, they'd get out and tear up people's yards, and you know, bring them in, and they'd have people be on horseback.
Driving
Your
in,
dad
right?
can
Oh,
remember
yeah,
that. So can your dad.
I've heard him talk about that, driving them in out of the country.
And then they'd put together, this is the day before trucks to take livestock in Chicago, and they'd take this, they'd get in so many hogs and so many cattle and make up a load, and a carload, and ship in Chicago. But they operated what they called, as I remember, the Earlville Shipping Association.
I think Herb Cook mentioned that too the other day.
Grandpa Walker, and did he say Grandpa Walker and Zan Harris?
He mentioned somebody else, I think. I don't remember.
It don't make any difference.
We'll have to look back at the tape, see who he mentioned, but he talked about the shipping
Grandpa
association.
Walker was involved in it.
Now the grain, was that shipped by rail too?
All the grain, when I came here, was shipped by rail. There was nothing on the river.
The farmers would bring it in, and I suppose
bring it in by horse and wagon when I first came here.
Those narrow wagons, 2 or 3 boxes on them, and drive in the elevator.
Most of them were those little square wagons, as I remember.
Little square green wagons with 2 horses.
Charlie Billings got in the trucking business, and that kind of opened up hauling grain by truck.
I wonder how many bushel would one of those wagons hold?
About 100 bushel, didn't they?
Would they hold that much? Yeah.
I
suppose if they had 3.
I thought they hauled about 100 bushel of little square wagons.
If they had 3.
Square sides, I'm talking about, not a.
If they had 3 boxes up. Probably.
Yeah, that's right. Pulled by horses.
Yeah. So it's been quite a change in the grain business that you've seen in your lifetime.
Yeah, that's right.
And your father started the business, and then you got into it, and it kind of modernized as you went along, and you kind of stayed up with. Now you were in the feed business. Were you always in the feed business too here, or
yeah, my
when
dad,
did that start?
Well, he started that way back when before I came here.
When was he in Purina? The Purina.
He never had
business?
anything but Purina.
Purina?
Oh, he started out with Wayne.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. He started out with Wayne, and they shipped him a carload of Wayne cattle feed one time for one of the hides up at Rowell. And the cattle wouldn't eat it.
Oh.
I mean, you won't want to hear this.
Well, that's all right.
But it's the truth.
If it's
So, I think Henry Hyde bought it. And so anyway, they shipped this carload of cattle feed, and the cattle wouldn't eat it. So he had it analyzed down at the University of Illinois, and it had some kind of a weed seed in there. Thistle, or not thistle, but something like that.
Something
but anyway, that
they didn't like.
So he got a hold of the people down at Wayne, and they said, he said, I'm going to ship it back to you. Well, they said, that's all right, ship it back, but they wouldn't pay the freight, so that was the end of Wayne.
That was the end of Wayne, and he made a deal with.
Then Purina came here, and he was handling Purina when I came, and we had both the Earlville and Rollo area. Well, however, it might be interesting to you, it is to me anyway, that Rollo being in DeKalb County and Earlville and LaSalle, we had a divided territory. You can understand what I mean. So
2 different districts?
We were 2 different districts. So my dad and I would go to Sterling to one meeting this week, and next week we'd go to Joliet to a meeting. So I was thinking about that recently, talked to somebody about that.
You didn't have all your business in one district then?
No, we had 2 salesmen, see, so we had to go to both, and you got the version of 2 different, or the idea.
If they didn't agree, why you could
well, you change like anybody else with a guy that you were riding with, and that was my job, was to go out and call on customers when I first came here.
Well, in talking about the feed business, I'd like to just touch on the chicken business you were into. That was really quite an enterprise in this community at one time.
Yeah, we started that about 1950, wasn't it? Yeah.
Now, was that through Purina, or was this?
Well, this was kind of
on your own, or what?
Well, there was a need for the eggs that people got out of like most like yourself, I suppose. Everybody had 250, would buy 250 chicks in the spring, and then they'd have some pullets in the fall, and nobody did that anymore, so there was an opportunity, And of course, with Purina's knowledge and help, and with Ralph here, we got into the contracting of hens, and
This was for egg production, right?
yeah, we bought the pullets right away.
You're speaking of Ralph Schmitz, who worked for you
32 years.
a number of years.
After he'd been with A&P all his life.
Well, now that chicken or egg production business, did you set the farmer up in the housing with the chicken houses and everything, or what was the deal on
We
that?
had a package deal, so to speak, and but the farmer had to have a concrete foundation, so the chicken house had to be his house.
The farmer owned the house
eventually.
eventually.
He had, like any other enterprise, the farmer had the landowner has to have, when you have a foundation, you know that. So they owned the house, or got the money to buy the house some way, and a lot of times part of the money from the egg production went to get the house paid for. And then we furnished the pullets and the feed, and marketed the eggs.
Now, did you guarantee a price to the farmer for the eggs, or did you get the eggs and market them?
We got a percentage of the eggs, or percentage of the income.
It seemed to be a successful enterprise. It was quite well received in this community for a number of years.
Brought a lot of money into this community, and there was a lot of competition. Originally, there was quite a great deal of competition to get the eggs, because the egg buyers wanted those eggs, and they could come into Earlville and pick up a semi-load of eggs sometimes twice a week.
I might mention how many chickens, or how many hens were in a house?
We had them from 3,000 up to 20,000. But I mean, we had 3,000 would be like out to Fritz Nelson's. That's where we started, 3,300. And then we went up to about 12,000.
Paul Bauer had a couple of pretty large houses.
Paul Bauer had 24,000.
He had 24,000?
Yeah.
At the peak production? It's
Well,
12,000?
we put 24,000 in a house.
That's a lot of hens. That's a lot of eggs, too.
And we had, north of Waterman, we had a man with, he had 3 houses. He had like 50,000, 40,000, and I can't remember for sure, but we had a lot of them. We ended up, we had 250,000 birds at one time.
250,000. That's a big operation. Well, the eggs go to most of them to commercial sources. Like
they went to Rockford, and Rockford, the Malquist at Rockford. Your sister's brother at Malquist, and
I think some might go to Chicago, wouldn't they, or would they?
well, they ended up there.
Oh.
Originally we sold eggs in Chicago, but
at least you had a good market.
yeah,
for
the
them,
market
so.
was really good for the eggs, right?
Now it's kind of all tapered off. I don't know too many that are left in the.
We don't have. There's not one of our houses left.
Not one of them left.
Many of them put them up when they had younger in the family. Like Paul Bauer had 4 boys and 80 acres, so he put those 2 houses up, and that was the way the boys helped. And
Now, do Heckathorn still have chicken hens out there?
But they're on their own.
It's on their own, yeah. There are a few of the houses in
Yeah,
use, but
that's
they're on
right.
their own. Yeah. Well, we better go on to some of the other parts of the business here. I would like to say a word about DeKalb, too. Yeah, I know you were a dealer for DeKalb seed products for some time. How did you get in the DeKalb business?
Well, they came here one day and didn't have any dealer in the area, and I didn't think I wanted it. And then came back 2 or 3 times, so we finally took it on, and that's how and that was another reason we got in the poultry business.
DeKalb was involved with that, too.
DeKalb had a place where they raised the pullets up to 18 weeks, and so then we bought our pullets from DeKalb.
Then you sold DeKalb seed corn.
Yeah, we sold DeKalb seed corn.
Large number of farmers in the area, I know.
Yeah, for many years.
What, they'd come in to you didn't really go out so much would deliver as they come in and got it here. Wasn't that
Well, it was a little different
the
here,
typical way to do it?
Yeah.
That makes me think of this building we're sitting in right now. It isn't an old building, but it was built by you and your father, I guess. Is
1950s, in the early 1950s.
It's a really good, well-constructed building. And how did this building happen to come about? Did you run out of room in the old one, or
Yeah,
what?
we had kind of a little office down there, and so we built this building because everything at that time was in bags.
Was the old office torn down, or what happened to it?
Well, it's over the second house, or the first house west of, my dad made a house out of that. That was his project.
Oh, well, which house? Was that moved somewhere?
Well, that was moved over, but the second, would be the first house west of where Mrs. George Pratt lives.
Oh, yes.
Who lives there? What's her
Oh, Edith Coleman.
Edith Coleman.
Yeah, that was your old office. Then.
Right.
Wow.
Dad added another bedroom on it, and finally, it seemed like he rented first, and then he sold it.
Well, then this house was, or the building was built by a contractor then, or what?
Yeah, we had Russell Brigden do a lot of the work, and his company, and then Fred Brown designed it, and at that time everything was in bags, like feed was all in bags, and
Seed.
lots of cattle around the country and around the area, and hogs, and that's before the days of bulk feed, so so that's how we built this building, to have storage space for all the bags.
I know it has an elevator in it, so you must have used the upstairs too.
Yeah, we used that for bag feed.
It has to be pretty strong construction to hold bag feed up there.
Yeah.
Was it steel, steel frame?
Steel was all designed by Conkey's in Mendoza, Conco.
Oh.
And
brick walls?
And it took 3 years to build it, because we continued the business. We built the east part, where we are now. Yeah, we built this the first year. Then we had this wall, a dividing wall. And the second year, we moved that office that we talked about down where Mrs. Coleman lives, and then we built that section. Then the third year, we put the brick on the front and the sides.
Now, this office we're in right now, was this always your office, or whose office was this?
This was my father's office.
This was your father's office?
Yeah, I built this when we put the second bathroom in a way, and extended this office part back here. Originally, we only had room for about one girl. We needed three, so we moved it back here. And so one winter when my dad was in Florida, we put this bathroom in, and I built this office for him. I didn't know if he'd ever come back here, but he really liked it because it was back here where he was quiet, and he could sit back here and write letters and do his bookwork, and he really enjoyed this room.
And your father passed away about, what, 10 years ago?
About 10 years
something like
ago,
that, and finally you decided that the time had come to close the business and retire, and I remember the sale was about in
81.
81, yeah.
September of 81.
So that was when the business, as you and your father were in all those years, was officially closed, was in September 81.
Mm-hmm.
We're about, I think we're about to the end of this, but there's a few things that I forgot to ask you about, and one of them was about this boat that was built in the town of Earlville. I had never heard about a landlocked town like Earlville being a place where the people would build a boat, but I understand that some of the people quite a few years ago, built a good-sized boat here. Could you tell us about that?
Well, I never saw the boat, only I have pictures of it. My grandmother painted a picture of it, actually. And as I put it all together, from my recollection, Dave Large had a blacksmith shop down on the corner where Wilma Bolson, or what is it, H&R Block now are located. It went clear around that corner. I remember the blacksmith shop being there, and they shoot horses in there and so on. And of course, Dave Large was as I recall, he was very mechanically minded, And evidently he and Forrest Whitaker, and there was a man named Harry Stevenson who was very active in the community at that time.
Now, was he the one that had a meat market or something?
Yeah, he had a meat market where the coin wash now is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right across the street from this office.
Now, was your father or grandfather
My
involved with this?
grandfather and Harry Stevenson, evidently, and Irvin Kaminke's father.
They were all involved with the boat?
They were all involved in the boat, and I don't
Wow.
know, let's see, I can't think of it.
No, was this a metal constructed?
No, I think
metal
it's
boat?
wood, isn't it?
Wood?
Yeah, I'm sure it must have been wood.
Mm-hmm.
And evidently they built this down in Dave Large's, I really don't know where it was built, but Dave Large was one of the key men, as I understand it, unless somebody knows better.
It was a pretty large boat, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, there's a picture of it on the wall here. I don't know if you can get that, Melvin, with your close-up lens or not, but this...
Take it off there and take it over.
Oh, okay, we can hold it up here maybe, and I don't know if you can see if the light reflects on it too much, but that was, what was the name of that boat, Bob?
Driftwood.
They named it the Driftwood.
Yeah, and I think that, and Harry Stevenson was one of the main ones of that main, he's one that,
Okay.
it was evidently his idea to build this boat.
All right.
And Harry Stevenson never married.
It looks like it was a pretty good size, about, what would you say, 30 or 40 feet long anyway?
And they took it down, as I remember talking about it, that they took it down pulled by horses, and I suppose they had some moving apparatus made out of steel wheels or something, and they took it down to the Illinois River. And I remember my father saying that he went on that boat all the way down to where the Illinois River and my grandfather too, and Irvin Kaminke, and Alvin Kaminke. He'd be another one involved in that boat. Alvin Kaminke and Irvin Kaminke's father were brothers, as I recall. And Irvin Kaminke was on that boat. I remember very well. My grandfather talking about it.
They went down the Illinois?
They went down the Illinois to where it meets Mississippi, yeah.
Oh, that's a pretty good distance. That's down to the St. Louis area almost.
Yeah, they used to have a lot of fun with that boat.
Well, now that must have had, what, a steam engine in it for power, probably?
Must have.
Must have had a steam engine for power.
Your guess would be good as
Well, I would think so at that time. That was the main power plant that they had then. Whatever happened to the boat?
Harry Stevenson and Forrest Whitaker were, as I recall, and my grandfather and Alvin Kaminke were really very, very good friends. And they were the ones, and I suppose maybe some others, because I wasn't here at the time, but.
Wonder what happened to the boat, do you know?
I don't know
whatever
that.
happened?
I have no idea.
Well, now that...
Well, I see Harry Stevenson left Earlville and went to Chickasha, Oklahoma. And so I suppose after Harry left, he was single. And I suppose that after Harry left, that was the end of the boat.
Probably.
Maybe that would be
Dissolved
maybe they sold it or
dissolved
whatever happened. I don't know.
Dissolved the partnership.
I don't know what happened, but Grandpa never said.
Now, just in passing, I don't want to spend a lot of time about it, but am I right? Wasn't your grandfather's lodge in Minnesota named
Well, then Harry Stevenson.
Driftwood too, or
Yeah.
how did that fit in?
Well, after Harry Stevenson went down to
Oklahoma.
Chickasha, he got in the lumber business down there, and this would be before the Depression of the 30s. He evidently he had a number of lumber yards, 20 or 30 lumber yards down there in all those small towns. And I knew Harry Stevenson quite well as a young boy. And so he evidently became quite wealthy. I was in his office in Chickasha, as a matter of fact, after he passed away. And so he got the idea that he some way that he built this lodge up at Park Rapids, Minnesota, near Dorset on a lake. He and my grandfather were up there together, and when they built this, and he even shipped the lumber in from the West Coast so he could have good quality fir, 2-inch, you know, and he shipped all the lumber in from the West Coast because he didn't want to use that cheap lumber that made out of softer wood up at and that he was available locally. And he built one and Harry Stevenson had quite a number of brothers and sisters, and at least brothers. And but Harry Stevenson built a lodge, and that was his, but he loved to entertain people. And he, as a boy of about 14, I went up there with my grandfather, and at that time he had this lodge with 5 bedrooms, and he had a cook named Mrs. Flaggett from Park Rapids that did the cooking, and he had a black chauffeur, and he was named Stevenson, but he spelled his Stevenson. He brought him up from Oklahoma, of course. And Mrs. Flaggett was the cook, and he had a cook stove in there, old-fashioned cook stove at that time. Everybody else did. I was about 14. I couldn't drive a car, and I went up there 2 or 3 summers and spent a month or longer with my grandfather and Harry Stevenson, and Mrs. Flaggett sometimes was there, and if she wasn't, she fixed the meals ahead, because her family was over in Park Rapids. But he always had a black chauffeur. The one I remember is the one I mentioned, but he had other ones as well.
But your family eventually ended up with this. Now, was named Driftwood also?
Yeah, it was named Driftwood after that. That's what Harry Stevenson named the Driftwood.
And your grandfather or your father eventually? No,
eventually, and after Harry Stevenson preceded my grandfather in death, and he's buried down at Troy Grove, where he grew up. I've been to where he's buried, and I've met some of his nephews and some of his family members down in Chickasha. And what'd you ask him?
Well, your family got
when Harry Stevenson died, why, of course, he put a lot of money his money into the lumberyard to keep it going from the Depression. And so after he passed away, when no one wanted that big lodge up there, pay the taxes and keep it up, and took money to keep it up in good shape.
Sure.
So, he left it to Mrs. Flaggett, his cook. That's right.
Okay.
In his will, he left this lodge to Mrs. Flaggett, and she didn't want it because she couldn't keep it up. So one day, my grandfather was a good friend had become my father as well over the years, and I knew him. Mr. Hewitt was his name, and he was in the bank in Dorset, which is between Nevis and Park Rapids, and maybe I'm elaborating too much, but anyway, my grandfather got a letter from Mr. Hewitt saying that Mrs. Flaggett would sell this driftwood for, I forget how much it was, $2,500 or something. That was a lot of money in those days, and still is, I guess. So anyway, my grandfather said he was going up and buy it and have it for the family. Well, we had a family dinner at that time, and Otto Gast from Roar was down to the dinner, and so he said, my grandfather Strong and Otto were good friends, had been for years, and so the two of them made up their mind. The two older fellas, they said they were going to, so Otto Gast, and they made up a kind of an agreement they'd go up together. So they went up together, and Otto Gast saw there was a darn good buy, because he told me he did. And so he asked my grandfather, he said he'd pay half if he'd like to buy half interest. Well, my grandfather wanted to keep it for the family, so the only way that he would sell him half interest was, or his proposition to auto gas, as he told me, my grandfather, that if he'd leave his half to my first wife, and Grandpa left his interest when he was gone to me.
Oh, I see.
So that's how I ended up with it.
Well, I know your family, and many people from Earlville went up there as
sure
guests of the Strong family. I remember my grandfather telling about it, Bill Stockley.
I remember very well him going up
He
there.
really enjoyed the times they had up at Driftwood in Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, Melvin's in-laws went up there for years, didn't they? The Woods and
Oh, I'm
Reverend
sure.
Kreider and
Sure, many people from there.
T.M. Senior and Chester Agathorn and Edith and Brignans.
A lot of the.
Were you ever up there in Melbourne? Doc Fisher and Dorothy were up there.
Well, Bob, it's been nice talking to you this morning. We're
time's
getting
up.
Time's flying, and we've got another
I hope I didn't bore you with
person
all this
to interview.
baloney.
No, this is very interesting, and I'm glad to get it down on the record, so maybe future generations would like to know what went on back in those days. Is there anything you'd like to add before we quit here? The way it always turns out, we always think of things afterward that we wish we'd said.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But thanks